Spiraling Flames Chapter 4. Azula woke before dawn, as her internal clock told her it was time to wake up and eat, before going through her and Naruto's morning training. She looked down and saw that Naruto was lying next to her, his arms wrapped around her, and his face pressed firmly into her chest. Obviously the two had not drifted away from one another after falling asleep in each other's arms the night before. Azula smiled a little bit, remembering the events of the previous day. It had been more successful than she could have ever hoped for. Not only had she been able to determine that Naruto had a crush on her, but she had also been able to bond with the boy. By being there for him, and comforting him after the incident with Mizuki, she had gained more of his trust and affection. She felt Naruto tighten his grip on her in his sleep, making her smirk. It was amusing that they had stayed like this all night long. Not because they were cuddled together, but because it was Naruto who was doing the cuddling. Every night before it was Azula who had latched onto the boy in her sleep, just like the first night, and refused to release the boy until she woke up. She no longer chased him around with fire when she woke up either. She saw no point in repeatedly terrifying the young boy every time she used him as her own personal living stuffed animal. She had instead made him promise never to tell anyone about her cuddling habit, promising great pain if he broke that promise. Normally she would have woken Naruto so that they could eat and begin his training, but she felt that after his display yesterday that he had earned the right to sleep in, if only for today. Besides, she had to admit that the younger boy looked adorable right now, making even the Fire Nation princess get a warm fuzzy feeling deep within her. She would never tell that to anyone though. So for now she would let Naruto lay in her arms and sleep in. Besides, if her plans for the future worked out, she suspected she would have to get used to situations like this. Bright morning sunlight flooded through the window of Naruto's bedroom, shining directly on his face. He groaned, turned his face into his pillow to escape the glare and tried to drift off back to sleep. He was especially tired today and his pillow was extra comfy. He also noted that it was warm, very warm. He opened his eyes and blinked. He realized that his pillow was not a pillow at all, rather it was Azula's bust that his head now laid upon. He briefly wondered if the older girl had rolled over to him and grabbed him as she had done most nights, before he remembered that it was actually him who had snuggled into her the previous evening. He also remembered why he had been so eager to be held by the girl. All the pain and guilt of the incident with Mizuki came rushing back. With those feelings came something else as well, the memory of Azula's words to him before the two had fallen asleep. She had said that he had made her proud, and that he had done well, he had made her happy. That thought brought forth a feeling of joy and warmth to Naruto, warmth that served to fight off the guilt and sadness he had felt for hurting Mizuki. He took a deep breath, smiling to himself, and was tempted to drift back into sleep when he heard Azula speak. "Naruto, how long do you intend on using my breasts as a pillow?" The girl's voice made him jerk backwards, separating himself from the princess. He looked at her, not really sure how she would react to the situation. Sure, she had been cuddling close to him at night for the past 2 weeks, but that was when she was the one initiating it, not him. He knew that the situation wasn't really all that different, despite that fact. But Naruto had learned from the girls in his class that logic didn't always apply in the minds of girls in these situations. It seemed his fears were unfounded, however, as he looked up and saw Azula looking right back at him, an amused smirk on her face. "My, that was a fast reaction," she said. "Could it be that you're embarrassed about using me as a pillow, Naruto?" "You don't have to be too embarrassed, you know, we're going to be doing that far more often if we get married eventually." "Azula-hime, it's not nice to tease me like that," Naruto whined, blushing a rather impressive shade of red. If it was possible, Azula's smirk grew. "Now Naruto, what makes you think I'm just teasing you? I wasn't lying when I told that boy yesterday that it's normal for relatives in the royal line to marry each other. When Naruto heard this, he blushed even more and started stammering, trying to form words. Eventually his mouth caught up with his brain and he managed to squeak out a sentence. "You mean we're going to get married?" The older girl laughed at his embarrassment and said, "I don't think we're going to be married just yet, Naruto. You're far too young, and I don't feel the need to become a wife so soon in my life. But it is possible that we could marry eventually. As the heir to the throne, I will need to wed and produce a child to take the throne after I take it, and no serious suitors have come forward as of yet. Of course you would have to prove yourself worthy of being my husband. I won't spend my life with a weakling, I won't give my love to just anyone." Naruto's mind reeled. Marriage to Azula was actually a possibility. It was hard to wrap his head around the idea. He knew he liked the older girl, and she had proven several times within the short time that he had known her that she was one of the few people who really cared for him. She had trained him, she comforted him when he was sad. She had helped him in so many ways. Her very presence had helped him, giving him a friend and someone to share his life with. Naruto loved having Azula in his life. She had been the best thing to happen to him since well ever. She had told him that she would have to leave for her home eventually, in the first week they had lived together, a fact that he dreaded. Azula had made his life so much better, he couldn't imagine what it would be like to watch her leave and never return. He had been hoping, and thinking of ways to make her stay, but he couldn't come up with anything. But now she had told him that the chance of marrying her was very real, and people who got married were always together no matter what. Well, that's what he heard in stories and from Gigi anyway. So it would make sense that if he could get Azula to marry him, she would stay in Konoha with him. With that thought, Naruto began to form a plan. Azula watched as her words sunk into the Naruto's mind, knowing that he was beginning to wonder at the possibilities of future marriage. While she didn't think that she would be able to convince him to leave his home with such a simple suggestion, she knew that it would sow the seeds for later. If she calculated correctly, it would also make him strive to become stronger and seek approval in her eyes, which would further strengthen his bond and devotion to her. She almost hoped it would take a long while for the Hokage shinobi to find a way to get her home. After all, it wouldn't do to leave such a fine weapon here. Azula could already see her plan coming to fruition, as visions of her being crowned as the Empress of the Four Nations, with Naruto standing by her side, acting as her guard and slaughtering her enemies, filled her mind. The Fire Nation princess was brought from her fantasy when she noticed Naruto's clock out of the corner of her eye. Seeing that Naruto only had an hour or so to get to the academy, she got out of bed, walked to the door of the bedroom. Turning to Naruto, she said, "Get dressed and meet me in the kitchen. You still need to eat before you attend your classes." With that, she turned and walked to her room to get dressed. Once she had gotten into a fresh change of clothes, she walked into the kitchen and proceeded to get herself a bowl of cereal. Cereal in and of itself was a food she found rather strange. It was a breakfast food made up of grain and flavoring, served cold in milk. This was completely different from the food in the Fire Nation. There all breakfasts were served hot, in fact most food was served hot. It was the Fire Nation after all, hot food was to be expected. Despite its differences, however, she found that she had grown rather fond of cereal. Maybe it was because of all the sugar that was in it. Azula always did have a bit of a sweet tooth. The dark-haired girl was brought out of her musings on the food in front of her when Naruto walked into the kitchen. Setting her bowl down, she watched as he got his own breakfast. When he sat down at the table beside her, she turned to him. "Naruto," she said, "I have a favor to ask of you." The blonde boy blinked. "You need a favor?" he asked, clearly wondering what she could need that he could help with. "Yes," she said. "When we work on your fire bending next, I want you to teach me how to use some of your ninjutsu." Naruto gaped at her. "You want me to teach you? Couldn't you ask Gigi for help with this?" I'm sure he could find you a good teacher. Azula shook her head. I could, but I don't think I would feel comfortable doing so. I don't really know anyone in the village aside from you, and I would have a hard time trusting anyone. Besides, I'm sure you will be a great teacher. The truth was that she didn't think the Hokage would actually help her to learn ninjutsu. All the conversations that the two had held up till now seemed to indicate that he would rather her remain ignorant of any techniques she could learn or use. Azula could understand why. She was an outside force within the walls of the village, and she held no loyalty to Konoha or its inhabitants. Teaching her ninjutsu would be counterproductive to ensuring the village's safety. That said, if Naruto were to teach her, it would be easier to get away with. Everything she had learned about him so far stated that he was towards the bottom of his class in grades and skill, so no one would take the idea of him teaching her seriously. Even if the Hokage found out about him teaching her, he would likely assume that he wouldn't be able to teach her well. Even if that assumption was correct, some knowledge was better than none in Azula's eyes. Well, okay. Naruto said. I guess I can try to teach you. I'll ask Iruka-sensei for pointers, he exclaimed. No, I don't think that's a good idea. He would tell the Hokage, and then he would ask me why I didn't come to him about it, and I'll be forced to tell him I didn't trust anyone, and I'll be embarrassed. You don't want me to be embarrassed, do you, Naruto-kun? She asked, doing her best to look cute, and adding the kun honorific for extra effect. She was pleased when she saw Naruto blush slightly and vigorously shake his head. Good, then it will out, little secret, she said happily. Now finish your breakfast and head off to the academy. When you return we will resume your bending training and you can begin teaching me. She saw the boy take on a saddened look when she mentioned the academy. What's wrong? She asked, although she thought she had a good idea as to what it was. It's just that I'm worried about what the other kids will think of me after what I did to Mizuki. I know you said that is part of the burden of power, but I don't want them to hate me if I can help it. I'm already laughed at a lot and picked on, what if they treat me worse now? Azula sighed. She would have to get rid of the boy's insecurity sooner or later. It wouldn't do to have a powerful man fighting for her and protecting her, if he was worried about the feelings of those around him. For now though, it presented yet another opportunity to get closer to him. You just said that they laughed at you and picked on you. Does it really matter whether they fear you? I can tell you right now, Naruto, that many if not all of your classmates will have some form of fear of you now. In my experience, this is actually a good thing. That fear will make them wary of you, meaning they will be less inclined to mock or bully you now that they have seen your power. Naruto seemed to consider her words. So in a way, fear means respect? But you respect me and you don't fear me, he said, sounding confused. Azula smirked. It's a different kind of respect. I respect you as a person, as someone who also holds power like you do. The respect they will have for you is like the respect that prey has for a predator. Understand? Naruto nodded but had a pensive look, showing that he was still thinking on her words. After a few moments he looked up and gave the dark-haired girl a smile. Thanks, Azula. I'll try to think of what you said. I'm not really sure that I understand all of it just yet, but it does help a bit. Anyway, I'm off to the academy. With that the boy turned and walked out the apartment door. Azula smiled to herself, thinking about how the boy ate up every word she said. Barring any major changes in the way the boy's life was going and how those around him treated him, she could see no reason why her plan would fail. Well, there was the Hokage to consider. The old man was still a potential problem, and after yesterday's display he would watch her closely. She knew she would have to find some way to throw off his suspicions, but she had no way of doing so at the moment, so she would have to keep an eye out for an opportunity to do so. For now though, she had a less pressing but more immediate problem to deal with. The same problem that had plagued her since the Hokage had given her the translation scroll, writing this world's language. Grabbing a brush, some ink, and several pieces of paper, Azula sat down at the table and began trying to copy the characters in the scroll to paper. Sasuke Uchiha sat in a desk by the window of the classroom, with his hands folded together in front of his face. He had arrived earlier than any of the other students, in an effort to avoid the more enthusiastic members of his so-called fan club. He was in deep thought, brooding one might say, something he did rather often. This time, however, his mind was occupied by something other than his thoughts of vengeance on his brother. This time his mind was dwelling on Naruto Uzumaki. When Sasuke had first met the boy, he had thought he was loud, brash, and talentless. That had changed when his clan had been wiped out. Naruto had been one of the very few people who didn't come to him with empty sympathy. Naruto treated him as a rival, as a goal to overcome, and yet he knew that the blonde understood his pain more than other person in their age group. At first Sasuke wondered if Naruto could be a friend, an ally, someone to rely on. Those thoughts were quickly dashed though as he realized that Naruto was still incredibly weak. He couldn't afford to have weak friends or allies when if he was going to kill Itachi. He had placed Naruto in the category of interesting, but not really worth noticing, after that. Then yesterday had happened, and all of Sasuke's previous judgments of the boy came into question. Naruto had done decently well on his weapons test, and had been fairly competent at answering questions in class. While both of these facts were a change from the norm, they wouldn't have been all that special by themselves. It was the Uzumaki's match against Mizuki that had gotten Sasuke's attention. Naruto had not only won against the Chunin, but had seriously wounded him as well. That was impressive, that showed progress. No one had been able to beat an instructor in combat since Itachi had attended the academy, a fact that held significance. Did this mean Naruto was a genius of the same caliber as Itachi? Did he simply get lucky yesterday? Even if that was the case, he had clearly gained more power. What of the girl who had arrived and left with Naruto? Who was she? Was she the one responsible for his growth? The girl had clearly radiated power and confidence. She also gave off another feeling, one Sasuke couldn't quite identify. According to the Hokage, she was a visiting princess and was a distant relative of Naruto. Did that make Naruto a possible heir to a nation? There were too many questions, and the only way he would gain answers was to confront Naruto himself. With that in mind, Sasuke decided he would take the first chance he got to talk to the blonde. As the classroom filled with more and more people, Sasuke kept an eye on the door, watching for Naruto. His view was soon obstructed by several girls who came over to ask him for dates, which he shot down by giving them glares. The girls looked slightly dejected and took their own seats, giving the dark-haired boy his view of the door back. After what seemed like an eternity, the boy he had been waiting for entered the room. Sasuke watched as Naruto took a seat in the back of the room, noticing that several students moved to get out of his path, looks of uncertainty and fear on their faces. Clearly many of the kids in their class had been frightened by his fight with Mizuki. It disgusted the Uchiha. They were here to learn to be ninja, to learn to fight and kill. They would have to see and do things like that a lot in the future. Maybe once, years before, Sasuke would have been frightened as well, but then his brother had made him watch as he murdered their clan. That had been far more terrifying and traumatizing than what Naruto had done. Sasuke was about to get up and go talk to him when Iruka walked into the room and called for everyone's attention. "Settle down everyone, settle down," Iruka said, prompting everyone to get in their seats. Now, as you all know, there was an accident during one of the spars yesterday resulting in Mizuki-sensei's hospitalization. He will be fine, however, and should be able to make a quick recovery though. That said, he won't be joining us for at least another few weeks. I also want you all to know that this was an accident, and that you will need to get used to events like this. It is part of being a shinobi. Sasuke could tell the teacher was trying to keep the class from shunning Naruto any further, but he doubted it would work. Based on how the blonde had been treated in past years, and how many of the students now looked at him with fear in their eyes, he guessed that any chance the Uzumaki had of being treated normally had vanished. His attention was drawn back to Iruka as the Chunin began the lessons for that day. The scar-faced man lectured the class for what seemed like forever, occasionally calling on students to answer questions and asking for input. Finally he announced that it was time for lunch break and released the students to go eat. The students started shuffling around getting out packed lunches and walking over to their friends. Sasuke saw a few girls starting to walk over to him, no doubt to ask him to eat with them. Before they could reach him, however, he stood up and walked towards the back of the class. He stopped in front of Naruto's desk and he saw the blonde look up at him, a puzzled look on his face. There was a tension in the room as the students watched the two, wondering what was happening. Sasuke smirked on the inside. They were all probably thinking he was going to try to fight Naruto. Well, then this would be a nice surprise. Hey. Want to sit with me for lunch? Sasuke asked the boy, and took great pleasure in the gasps of jealousy and outrage his fangirls gave. Oh, how he loved tormenting them. Azula felt like jumping and shouting for joy, and had she not been raised as she had, she probably would have. She had done it. She had finally gotten the characters of this world's language down. She had written them all successfully, multiple times. She would continue to practice, of course, but for now she was happy that they looked the way they were supposed to. Despite the fact that she wasn't leaping all over the place in joy, she still felt she deserved a reward, so with that in mind she headed out the door of the apartment and into the village. Within half an hour she was sitting on a stool in Ichiraku's, happily devouring her 5th bowl of ramen. Ever since Naruto had introduced the heavenly food to her, she had resolved to try every type of ramen that Ichiraku had to offer. While she wanted to eat there every day, Azula realized that eating too much ramen was probably not good for her, so she had to moderate the number of times she ate at the ramen stand. That didn't stop her from ordering 6 or 7 bowls every time she did go there. No sane person could blame her for that, it was just so good. In her mind, Azula vaguely wondered if she should give Naruto some sort of medal when they returned to the Fire Nation, as a reward for giving her this amazing food. The dark-haired girl watched as Ayam placed a 6th bowl of ramen in front of her, and resisted the urge to drool. Just as she was about to start devouring the food, she caught movement out of the corner of her eye. Turning her head, she saw the same cat-masked Umbu that had been her guide and escort on her first day in the village. Azula suddenly got the feeling she wouldn't be able to finish her ramen. It was a bad feeling. Aniko-san, I don't suppose you're here to enjoy some ramen? Azula said, knowing full well that the female Umbu wanted something else. No, I'm afraid not. Hokage-sama wishes to speak with you immediately, the masked woman replied. Azula sighed. Do I have time to finish my ramen? Hokage-sama wishes to see you immediately, the Umbu said. Azula almost considered ignoring that and finishing her ramen anyway, but common sense overcame her desire for the heavenly food and she stood up. Throwing some money on the counter, she called out to Ayam. Ayam-san, I have to leave. I left the payment on the counter. Turning to the cat-masked woman, she said. Okay, Nico-san, take me to the Hokage. Naruto sat under a tree next to Sasuke. The two both had their lunches in front of them, but neither had taken a bite yet. When the Uchiha had invited him to eat lunch with him, Naruto had been as surprised as the rest of the class. He didn't know what he had expected when the dark-haired boy had approached him, but this wasn't it, especially after how the rest of the class treated him. Hey! Naruto said, breaking the silence. Why did you want to eat with me? You've never showed any signs that you wanted to be friends with me or anyone for that matter. Sasuke looked over at him. Because of what you did yesterday. Up until now I haven't had a reason to talk to anyone. I have to avenge my clan and then rebuild it. I don't have time to have fun and hang out with people. I don't mind having friends, allies, but everyone else is too weak. They would be a liability in my quest, not an asset. I need friends who can help me avenge my clan, not weaklings. Until yesterday I thought you were weak, but you proved otherwise. I guess I'm curious as to what changed. Naruto blinked at that. Sasuke hadn't been making friends because he thought they were weak. He would have done anything for friends, no matter who or how strong they were. The Uchiha's mindset seemed crazy to him. But at the same time it fit in, a little, with what Azula had told him. Power respects power seemed to be the concept here. So now that you think I'm strong you want to be friends? Naruto asked, feeling rather angry that the Uchiha hadn't thought him worth the time of day before because he had thought he was weak. I don't know if friends is the right word, Sasuke said. In time maybe we would be friends, but right now I want to get to know you. You are interesting, you beat a Chunin in combat. That means you're stronger than anyone else we know in our age group. I don't know if we would be friends or rivals. Either way I feel you have something to teach me, something I can learn from. Even if we end up hating each other, you're someone who I would want to keep tabs on. You want to learn from me? If you're talking about my fire bending, then you can forget it. That's a family thing. Only Azula and I can learn it. Sasuke nodded. That isn't necessarily what I meant, but yes I had hoped I could learn those fire techniques. But if they're family techniques then I won't pry. As someone who comes from a clan, I know how important family jutsu are. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Then if not that, then what did you mean, he asked. I thought maybe we could spar, and train together sometime. Even if you can't teach me any jutsu I can improve my own skills by fighting against you. The same goes for you. We're both strong and by training with each other we can only become stronger. Naruto thought about that. It made sense, after all he had gotten quite a bit stronger by training with Azula, maybe Sasuke could help him too. He also noticed that Sasuke didn't seem afraid of him like the other children had been. In fact if he was telling the truth, his fight against Mizuki had prompted the Uchiha to reach out to him. Could he be someone else who would accept him, like Azula had? Could he gain another friend? He was brought out of his thoughts when the bell rang. Sasuke stood up and looked down at him. Looks like lunch is over. You don't have to answer me now, but give it some thought. It would help us both in the long run. Naruto watched the Uchiha walk towards the academy and stood up himself. He noticed with a little irritation that he hadn't eaten any of his lunch, because he had been so busy thinking about what the Uchiha had said. Sighing, he headed back to class, knowing he would have to resign himself to being hungry and bored for the rest of the day, rather than just bored. Azula entered the Hokage's office for the second time in less than 24 hours. She wondered what the old leader wanted this time. She guessed that she would find out soon enough though. You called for me Hokage-sama, she asked as she entered the room. She noticed that the two of them were not alone. Standing in front of the Hokage's desk was a tall man, wearing a green vest over a blue suit. She also saw that he wore a mask over the lower half of his face and one of his eyes. He also had spiky silver hair. Azula, come in. Yes, I did call for you, the Hokage said. We have several matters to discuss. And what would those be? She asked, wondering if he was going to bring up the incident with Mizuki again. I have 3 things I would like to talk to you about, 2 of them involving Naruto. Don't worry, it's not about what happened yesterday. While I'm not happy about what happened, I know that what's done is done, and punishing you won't change it. That said, please try to prevent such things in the future. I still want to talk to Naruto myself about what happened, but that can wait for a while. I see. The girl said. Then what is it you wished to discuss? Well, first off, I'd like you to meet Hatake Kakashi, the Jounin in charge of leading the ninjutsu experiments regarding getting you home. I thought you might want to know a little about what we're doing and how we are doing it. Yo. The silver-haired man said, raising a hand in greeting. Annoyed that the man gave her such an aloof greeting, Azula neglected to give a bow to the man and simply said, Nice to meet you, Hatake-san. Can you tell me what progress you have made so far and if you have an estimated time frame to get me home? The man put a hand up to his chin. We haven't made much progress as all yet, we're still working on studying other jutsu that involve or may involve interdimensional travel. As for a time frame, I have absolutely no idea. Could be months, could be years, maybe even decades. Azula was momentarily stunned. Decades? It could take decades for her to get home. She had expected it take a long time, after all the lost prince had never made it back, but she assumed that he hadn't had the same resources to help him like this village did. After all, he had only been taken in by one clan, hardly a match for the resources and knowledge a settlement like Konoha would have. Of course, Azula knew that even with all those resources it might take a long time, even years, but she never assumed it could take a decade or more. Why? She asked, finally finding her voice. Why would it take so long? Well, there is a lot that goes into it, Kakashi said. Creating jutsu is dangerous at the best of times, even when we're not trying to bend space and time or make a door between dimensions. We have to find a way to mold our chakra into doing such a thing first. Then we would have to find a safe way to make sure we were actually connecting to another dimension. Even then we would have to confirm it was the right dimension. After that we would have to make sure the way stable and wouldn't collapse on you. We would also have to make sure we were opening the portal in a safe area, wouldn't want you to be stuck on the bottom of the ocean, dropped from 1,000 feet in the sky. Or be crushed under a mountain, now would we? Azula sighed. She hadn't thought about things like that before. If all that went into the process, then she really could be here for decades. If that was the case, she might as well just stay here and make a life here. No. She wouldn't think like that. She couldn't think like that. She was the princess of the Fire Nation. She was the daughter of Fire Lord Oze. She was born to be a ruler. She would return home, she would become Fire Lord, and she would conquer her world. She would do this, even if it took 1,000 years. No. She said. No, we wouldn't want that at all. Thank you for explaining the process to me, Hatake-san. I will try to be patient from now on. You're welcome. But remember, I'm just the leader of ninjutsu team. There's a few ninjutsu team working on a way to get you home as well. I suspect they will have more luck than my team. I see. Azula said. Turning back to the Hokage, she asked, what are the other things you wished to discuss, Hokage-sama? You said they involved Naruto. The aged shinobi breathed out a stream of smoke from his pipe before replying. Yes. I'm almost certain that Naruto hasn't told you yet, but his birthday is this week. Azula blinked. Naruto's birthday was this week? That was something she didn't know, but why did the Hokage need to talk to her about that? That's when she remembered that the demon that had attacked Konoha, the same one sealed away within the young boy, had attacked the night he was born. So it wasn't just his birthday, it was the anniversary of the demon's attack. I see you recognize the significance of that. the Hokage said. Good. Every year we hold the Kyuubi festival, to celebrate the demon's defeat and honor those we lost. It is a time of revelry and mourning, so many people will be partying and drinking. They will also hold the hatred and sorrow of that night in the forefront of their minds. Azula saw where this was going. You're worried that some of the villagers may try to attack Naruto, she said. When the Hokage gave a nod, she asked, has he ever been attacked before? Twice before, the Hokage said. Both times happened within a year of his birth. I had the perpetrators executed and announced that anyone else who attempted to harm the boy would suffer the same fate. Since then the villagers have ignored the boy, treated him like he doesn't exist or have ridiculed him, but no one has tried to harm him. This year may be different, however, because of his fight with Mizuki. Until now the boy has been thought of as a failure by many, they didn't see him as a threat. Now he has come close to killing a Chunin while still in the academy, this has raised fear and suspicion in the minds of many. That fear mixed with alcohol and excitement could possibly lead some of the more foolish people in the village to start something. It's part of the reason I was so angry with what happened yesterday. Azula narrowed her eyes in thought. She knew that alcohol and large groups of people led to poor decisions, mix in a little fear and grief and you have a recipe for violent stupidity. I will be ready to defend him at a moment's notice. I won't let any harm come to him, you have my word on that. I'm glad, the Hokage said. Truthfully, I suspect that the chance of anything happening is low, but it is still higher than it has been in a long time. I hope I won't have to remind anyone of the law the hard way, but I will if necessary. That said, if you can avoid any trouble it would be vastly helpful. Of course Hokage-sama, I will do my best. Now what is the other matter you wished to discuss regarding Naruto? Azula couldn't be sure, but for a moment she thought she saw a smirk of pure vengeful glee cross the Hokage's face. Of course by the time she registered what she thought she saw, the old man's face was blank. Well, as I mentioned, Naruto will be turning 11 this week, the Hokage said. I have been observing Naruto for some time now, and I have noticed that he is beginning to show an interest in girls. Now this isn't unexpected, many children display interest in the opposite gender around this age, often declaring themselves to be boyfriend and girlfriend or pretending to marry each other. It's all fun most of the time and they hold no physical attraction to each other for the most part. But Naruto is an Uzumaki. The Uzumaki are known for longevity and having boundless energy. This extra life force causes several changes in the Uzumaki, for example they mature faster. Azula wasn't sure why, but she had a sinking feeling in her stomach all of a sudden. Something in the Hokage's voice held a sense of mirth, and she could see that despite his wearing a mask, Kakashi seemed to be smiling. Meaning what? She asked. Meaning that Naruto is going through the beginning stages of puberty, despite his relatively young age. So it is up to you as his closest relative and legal guardian to give him the talk. When Azula heard this sentence she did something rather un-Azula-like. She blushed. It wasn't a large blush, but it was definitely noticeable. What was more noticeable was the slight stutter in her voice when she spoke next. What do you mean I have to give him the talk? She asked. She had known that the topic of sex would have to brought up eventually, much of his plan involved future sexual interactions between herself and Naruto. But she had in all her calculating forgotten that he didn't even know what sex was yet. She remembered her own talk that her mother had given her. It was one of the most awkward and embarrassing moments in her life. Her mother had given her the talk when she was only 10, shortly before she left the palace. The only comfort that Azula had from the memory was the knowledge that her mother had been equally embarrassed. Now she had to give the same talk to Naruto? I mean, you have to explain sexual intercourse to Naruto, the Hokage said, his eyes sparkling with mischievous glee, clearly enjoying the girl's flustered state. It can't be that hard to explain, I'm sure, unless of course you don't know how it's done. Azula's face grew a little more red. Of course I know how. I just don't know how I'm supposed to explain this. It was at this moment that Kakashi spoke up. I believe this might help, he said, pulling out a little orange book. He opened the book, flipping through a few pages before handing it to Azula. Here, just have him read this. That will solve the problem. Azula blinked. A book would help. How? Azula looked at the page the book had been opened to and started reading. She read the first sentence, then the second, then the third, then Kakashi's book went up in blue flames and turned to ash. The masked man gave a cry and fell to his knees, reaching down cup the pile of ash that now lay on the floor of the Hokage's office. Why? He cried. Why would you burn such a wonderful work of art? You are evil. Pure evil. Ignoring the man, Azula took a deep breath and tried to regain her composure. Looking back at the Hokage, she said, Okay. I can give Naruto the talk, but does it really have to be so soon? The sooner the better. The old shinobi said. Oh, and please don't go into too much detail, I don't want to traumatize the boy. Believe me, said Azula, you don't have to worry about that. Now if that is all, may I take my leave, Hokage-sama? Yes, you may go. The elder man said. Azula gave a slight bow to the man and then hurried out of the office as fast as possible, leaving a chuckling Hokage and a still sobbing Kakashi behind her. Naruto sighed in relief when class was released for the day. It had been the worst day he had in a long time. True to expectations, many of his classmates now looked at him with fear in their eyes and avoided him. A few of the students, like Kiba, had come up to him and told him they thought his fire bending was cool and asked if they could learn it. And they all left disappointed when he told them that they could not. Otherwise Sasuke had been the only person to actually try to talk to him. He'd even answered a question wrong on purpose, given the most ridiculous answer he could think of, to get a smile or a chuckle out of someone in the class. No one had laughed. Azula's words had proven true, power makes fear. Naruto knew that he would always be feared by his classmates now, and there was likely nothing he could do to change that. Still, Sasuke had shown that power earned respect as well, once again proving Azula right. The boy was now trying to reach out to Naruto, offering to train with him and talk to him. Naruto thought about the Uchiha's offer. If he was able to train with the top student in class, his grades and strength would undoubtedly improve even further. He could combine that training with his training from Azula and grow even stronger. That would impress the girl, he thought. Maybe he could get Sasuke to help him find a way to teach Azula how to use chakra as well. He wouldn't Sasuke that's what they were doing, but he figured if he brought it up in a roundabout way, he could discover a way to teach Azula the basics. And if everything went well, he could end up having another friend. A new friend that wouldn't be afraid of him. That would be awesome. He couldn't wait to tell Azula about this. He bet she would be thrilled to learn he was close to making a new friend. With that thought in mind, the young boy rushed out of the academy grounds and through the village towards the apartment he shared with the Fire Nation princess.